Welcome. Welcome back to my channel Conquer the Fear. Ever found yourself scratching your head when both the application.properties and application.yml seems to have conflicting values in your Spring Boot project? You have set both the files expecting one to override the other one, but the behavior is totally different from what you thought. Why is application.properties taking precedence over the application.yml? When you expected the opposite, right? Is it a bug or is it just a mysterious Spring Boot magic? In this video, we are going to cut you through the confusion and explain once and all how the Spring Boot handles property files while actually loading the order is how to make sure your configuration works just the way you want it. So let's clear up the struggle and solve this issue together. So let's get started. So please stay back and watch the video till the end. So Spring Boot. You already know it is used for the faster development and making your development quite easy. So when it comes to application.properties or application.yml, it is used for making your application flexible to how it has been externalizing your configuration through the use of property files. Like you have application.properties and application.yml, right? This mechanism of loading this particular file, the way they are prioritized, is quite important and also an important aspect of Spring Boot configuration, how it works. Now here in this video, we are going to break down how Spring Boot load the properties from this particular files, what is their preferences and their related hierarchy classes. Now before going to the actual thing, I wanted you all to understand the hierarchy of the precedence, why it behaves like that, how it is being loaded, what is the precedence. We'll look here because the application.properties and application.yml when they are loaded is dependent on the sequence what you are seeing here, right? So very first thing, the preference goes to the command line arguments, right? Now if you see whatever the key value pair you pass it on the command line, that is going to be the precedence one. Second, you have some system properties which is you have configured. You will have a property as in the value as well. Second, you have some OS. Third, you have the OS environment variables, that is Spring hyphens underscore something variables you declare, right? Those are the OS configuration related thing. Then comes the actual application.properties and application.yml. Under this also there will be a precedence decided by the application. We'll discuss more on that part, but yeah, let's move forward. Then comes the profile specific files. Like you have the different environments, dev related, production related, staging related. So based on the property files, it will be loaded. We have at the rate configuration properties, so that is based on the classes based on the property which you are trying to inject. Okay. Then comes the default Spring Boot properties. I hope this particular hierarchy of the precedence is very much clear and you have a somewhat understanding of what is going to be the next thing. Now, when are you loading or when are you working with a Spring Boot, the order of priority for a configuration file is like this below. So, apart from what we discussed in the previous slide, where the command line takes over the precedence, but when it comes to having properties defined in the application.properties and the YML, which one is going to take the precedence and which one is going to load the first, we'll discuss that as well. But for your own information, if you have both the application properties and the YML, which is going to exist in the same directory of the resource, then application.properties is going to be picked up first by the Spring Boot, right? And then it is going to set up and it is going to take the precedence and it is going to override your application.yml. So I hope you are clear that if you have two files, one is application.properties and one is application.yml, whatever properties you have there, it will be overridden by the application.properties. Let's say you have some different properties, it is there in the properties and then some different properties in the YML, then it will be loaded accordingly. But if you have same properties defined in the same two files, then properties will be taken as a precedence. Now, when it comes to the Spring Boot application, you must be knowing that at the rate Spring Boot application is the starting point of entry, and that is the main method. It is going to have the main method. So from there, loading of the configuration starts, right? Now I would like to tell you, like, what is the hierarchy over here, right? So when you go to the very root level, I mean at the very very base level, as we already discussed, one is YML and the one is properties, right? There are two classes. One is YML property source loader, which is responsible for loading the YML file, and we have a property source loader, which is responsible for loading the actual property file. And then on top of this, there will be a class that is property source loader, which is going to be a super class for this both the first and second. After that, the Spring then comes, like, when we are trying to load the application, and we are running the main class, right? Spring Boot application class, right? So this is where the application flow starts in, and then it is going in the hierarchical way. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. Now, when it comes to as an discussion of an entry points, right? So as we already discussed, Spring Boot application is going to be the main starting point. It is going to be the bootstrapping way. So it can load the property source objects, which is going to include your YML properties, and also it is using the various other mechanism. So when you run that particular at the rate Spring Boot application, there is a run method. We'll go into the code and check it out, but this method is the final step, is going to process it. It is going to bootstrap your application Spring context, and then it is going to run the application. So in the run method, it is going to take the argument. So this method will run the application, and inside this method, it flows like this. First it will load the application context, then it is trying to load the properties price, and then it is going to load the YML properties, and then it is going to do the rest of the things like being initialization, and then it is going to handle the life cycle of the application. Okay, now let's jump into the code. Now if you look at here, I have one of the Spring Boot application open up here. Okay, and I have got a run method over here. Okay, so if you look at it, this is going to be the run method. This is going to be the starting entry point of your application to start up. Okay, now what we'll do is that we will debug this particular application, and we'll also check, where this particular flow is running. Okay, so before that, I would like to tell you, like, I have properties, application.properties defined under the resource folder. I have this one properties which is going to be common in the application.yml as well. Okay, so just have a note of it, like, the current port is 9099, and in application.yml we have 9093. Okay, so as per the discussion, let's see, like, what is going to take the precedence. Okay, and we'll first run this particular application. Okay, just to showcase you what is going to take the preference. Okay, now if you check it out over here, right? If you see here, the application is started here, right? And if you see here, the Tomcat is started on this particular port 9099, which is mentioned in the 90 application.properties. Now, as per our discussion, it is very much clear that if you have some properties, application.property is going to take the preference over here. Okay, now let's say, uh, let's debug this particular application. Now I'm going to stop this particular application. Now I'm going to debug this particular application. Now let's see. uh, Before that, I'm going to go to this Spring Boot application dot properties, which we already discussed. There is a load method over here. Okay, now if you go to this particular top of this, as we already discussed, there is a super class for it here. Under this, there is an abstract class. It's an interface, I would say. So this is going to be an interface where this has got implementation of this, right? Yeah. Now if you see, this is loaded over here. Okay. Similarly, we have this particular property source loader, where this particular I put up the pointer over here as well. Where, this is again is going to be implemented from this particular interface. Okay. So I will just debug this particular application. Now, if you look at this particular thing, it is going to be the first coming to this particular Spring Boot application. Uh, Now, if you go to the Spring Boot application, it has come from this particular location from here till here, right? Now, if you check it over here, it has come to this particular run method inside it, right? After this, it is going to do lot of stuff over here. It is going to print the banner. It is going to create the application context. So we discussed about it, right? This is going to be under this particular application create context. Now it is going to, if you go underneath and this, and then you'll be able to see, like, and finally you will be able to land in this particular. So now I'm going to skip the debug pointer and come to this. Now if you see here, the very first thing, actually, as I mentioned, is going to be loaded by the property source loader. So if you see here, just check inside this. If you see, this is the first application.properties being loaded. Now if you go below this, there is a for loop over here. Now you will see at the end here what is being loaded over here. Okay. Now if you see, you expand it over here, now you'll be able to see, like, all these properties, whatever is mentioned in this particular properties file, it is loaded over here. Now let's skip and go to the other. Now then comes the yml, right? Similarly, it is loaded and it is calling the load method over here. Again, when I'm going to skip and check here, similarly this has landed into the application.properties loader over here. Okay. Now yml property source loader. Now if you see under this particular load method, this has gone through, and then it is loaded the properties, whatever you can see here. Again, if you expand it and see here, this is going to take from the properties over here, but ultimately the precedence is taken from the properties file. Now if you see, the application is got started, and it is will be running on the code whatever we have defined in the application.properties. I hope this particular video is helpful to you, and also you got an understanding of when this particular application dot property and YML is loaded, how it is being loaded, and what is the sequence, what are the classes involved in it. Okay, so you have in-depth understanding of what is happening in depth inside the background of Spring Boot application. When it is trying to run the application, it is going to create the application context, and we have different properties file already in the class path. So how it is going to load based on the preferences, right? We all have discussed. So please share it with the needy people. I hope this video was very helpful, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon.